First, we're going to do some review, and I'm going to slow down just a little bit. I want to make sure you get this. This is very important that we understand this stuff. Okay, we talked last week a little about general revelation. What this is going to show. This is not a Bible lesson. I'm not quoting a God scripture here. You know scriptures. What I'm going to do is show you the science. I'm going to show you the science and the logic behind knowing there's a God. Because if there's a God, and if this planet and universe is much younger than they're saying, then everything they're teaching collapses. And there's going to be a God they're going to meet one of these days. So, general revelation, we're going to show something here. First of all, we intended to do two parts, two parts for creation and evolution, but it turns out I'm gabbing. What can I say? So, we're going to do now part 2 of part 1. Okay? And if we got time, we're going to get into part 1 of part 2. Okay? All right, so here we go. Last week, just a little bit of review. These are the 4 statements they want you to believe. They need you to believe these because if you won't believe these, they can't hook you. They need you to believe that the earth and the universe is billions of years old. Number 2, they need you to believe that everything around you happened by random chance. A flip of the coin. Just by pure coincidence, everything happened. Number 3, that evolution's a proven fact. Boy, they'd like you to believe that one, okay? And then number 4, that this Bible and science are not compatible. One's faith, the other's science, and they don't mix. If they can get you to believe these 4 things, they've got you going down the right road. First of all 4 of these statements are false. They're all false, they're all falsifiable, and they're all unprovable. And all they are is a philosophy. It's just a religion. Evolution is a religion. It's not science. You'll see as we go. So don't buy into these 4 statements. Then we talked about this big long word, 17 letters long, uniformitarianism. This is their foundational premise, okay? And it is the simple definition of it from their books is it's the current speeds of motion, buildup, and decay activity are the same today as forever. Nothing's ever changed. It's always proceeded at the same speed. Okay? They want you to believe that. And that whole principle is called uniformitarianism. Now, why is it that big long word? Because the root word of it, in other words, if we put it in our terms, it would be this. At whatever speeds things are now decaying, moving, or evolving, there's never been any change. It's the same today as in all the ages past. Yeah. They want you to believe that. Now, the reason they use that big long word is because that's the root word, uniform. A military wears uniform, okay? And they all look alike. Everybody's got to look the same, okay? Because that's what the word means. Uniform means the same or alike. And so that's what they're trying to teach, is that everything is proceeded the same for all eternity. The same speed. All right. And then last week we talked about there were 2 creators of this evolutionary theory that's called slow random processes. Okay, these are the 2 guys. Nobody hardly knows about Wallace because he was a poor professor. Had very little money. He could not publish. Darwin was the guy who married into the Wedgwood family. His wife was heiress to the Wedgwood fortune, Wedgwood crystal, Wedgwood china. They sold Wedgwood pottery literally all over the world. They were gazillionaires for the day. And Darwin was in that family. That's why Darwin had all the money in the world to do whatever he wanted. Okay, but these are the 2 guys that actually created the theory of slow mutated evolution all at the same time. All right, now, last week we also talked about the 2 types. There are 2 basic forms of evolution, okay? One is microevolution, the other is macroevolution. When Darwin went on his sail around the world aboard the HMS Beagle, and he landed in the Galapagos Islands and all over the world, and he took in samples, what he found was evidence for this, microevolution. Differences within species. Okay? Variations of geckos, variations in deer, variation in dogs, variation in all creatures, okay? Turtles, whatever, okay? There's variations within them. But then he took the data that he got from microevolution by studying finches, for instance, on the Galapagos. Some had long beaks, some had short beaks, but they were all finches. So he said, wow, that means then that if the nose can change over time, over a few hundred years, what if we gave them millions of years? Now it can change from a bird into something else. And so he came up with what is known as macroevolution. So he found microevolution, which no reasonable person denies, but he invented macroevolution. Him and Wallace both. All right, and the world bought it hook, line, and sinker. Why did they buy it so quickly? Because they need a way to get rid of God. The world has always hated this. And if they can find a way to deal God out of the card game, they're going to do it. And that's why as soon as he did. Now his wife believed the Bible. Darwin's wife warned her husband, don't do this, because this is opening a Pandora's box. He ignored her. Men do that sometimes, don't they? And so he ignored her, and the world just bought everything he said. Now, not everything, but they shaped it and molded it and so on and so on. And so we just need to understand, when someone starts talking about evolution, microevolution is provable. Macroevolution is a made-up fantasy that a frog could ever change into a bird. Not going to happen. In fact, if a frog did change into a bird, which, by the way, evolutionists believe, why can't we find any of the transitional fossils between them? There's no frogs, there's no ferns. We don't find their skeletons anywhere. All we find is skeletons of frogs and skeletons of birds. Nothing in between. Because it's all a fraud, it's a fantasy. Like these deer. These deer actually come from all over the world. One in the lower right-hand corner is a springbok of South Africa. The one in the bottom center is the little tiny deer from Japan. It doesn't stand but about 2 feet tall. It's a little bitty thing. And our deer is in the upper left-hand corner. And then there's the pronghorns in the lower left-hand corner from up in Montana. All of these are in the taxonomy or in the animal chart of deer. Okay, all of them. And they're cousins. These are cousins. But yet, if you mix in a laboratory, you can actually, these can be mated in a laboratory. Now, they wouldn't touch each other in real life, probably, because they're different. But they can be mated. You can produce a creature. All right? Because God said all will stay within their own kind. And what often happens is when they do that, I'm fishing for a word I can't find. They can't reproduce. They're sterile when they produce these other creatures. They're sterile. They can't reproduce themselves. And so microevolution explains variation within a species. And then we talked about the 4 theories of evolution, because Darwinism's not enough. The first one we talked about is Darwinian, and of course you always see this picture here of starting with the monkey and ending with the guy walking. This is a universal picture. You'll see it all over the place. Well, Darwin believes there was this first simple cell, and we won't even get into that, of how hard it is to have a simple cell. And then after that came a long chain, like this, just like a chain, of slow mutations that went from pond scum all the way up to a human being walking, or the guy they call Homo habilis. Homo habilis was the very first man, they say, that stood upright, okay? And that was about 2 million years ago, according to them. Now that's Darwinian evolution, okay? Then the second one we looked at is called theistic. They know that the simple cell is anything but simple. And so how in the world did this complex cell just arise? How did life just suddenly spring up all over the world? Well, along comes a Christian named Asa Gray who says, God did that. And so he stuck God into the hard parts. The parts that Darwin couldn't explain, Asa Gray said, God made the first cell. God did this. God did that. Then God just stood back, folded his arms, and let Darwinian evolution take over. And then when Homo habilis stood up, God called them Adam and Eve. And they were the first man after they evolved millions of years. That's what Asa Gray believed, okay? It's a compromised Christian theory. Then the next one came out in 1972, okay? The year I graduated from high school, Mr. L. Gould and Eldridge. Eldridge is a professor at University of Chicago. Gould was a science teacher at Harvard. These two guys collaborated and produced what is called punctuated equilibrium. Why can't we find frog and bird fossils? Why aren't there any fossils in between frogs and birds? Here's why. They know that there's a flaw in Darwin because they have no fossils in between. So along came Elliott Gould and along came Niles Eldridge, and they said, here's what it is. Here's what it is. It went long time, and then boom, there was this explosion, and you were at the next level, just like that. It went from creepy crawlies right up to amphibians. And then they couldn't find fossils, and millions of years went by. There was another explosion in evolution, and it went from the froggies that jump on the water to the birds that fly into the air. And then millions of years went by, and it became university professors, okay? And so anyway, this one's called punctuated equilibrium. By the way, do you know 3 out of every 10 evolutionists believe this? So when you're talking to someone about evolution, 3 out of 10 believe that, 30% of them. And then the last one was created in 1981. Everyone knows about DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, okay? DNA, well, DNA was discovered by Dr. Francis Crick. Dr. Francis Crick is the one who invented this. He believes that Martians, or, Klingons, okay, came from far away, and they seeded the planet just like Johnny Appleseed. They just threw all these little bitty things on the earth, and then they just stood back at the bottom. You can see is just like normal evolution. Then they just folded their arms, visit every once in a while their spaceships, and they've been watching evolution from the first cell that they sowed in the garden as it mutated up to become man. Okay? 12% of evolutionists, or about 1 out of every 10, believe this. And this is the fastest growing of the 4, right here. Because of UFOs and ET coming down and all this stuff. All right, now we can continue from where we left off last week. That's just review. Okay, actually, evolution is a secular religion. It takes more faith to believe in that than it does to believe in this book. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a moment. Here's the definition of evolution. Tell me if this makes sense to you. Okay? This is the definition of evolution. It is the belief that once there was nothing, then something happened to the nothing, and nothing somehow magically exploded for no reason and created everything. Then everything, for no reason whatsoever, arranged itself into self-replicating bits of matter and turned into mankind. That's actually what they believe. Remember the van we talked about last week? Wouldn't it be nice to not have to explain where the van came from? Well, that's where they're at. They don't want to have to talk about it. And so they call this science. This is silly. We talk about this, and I'm using this facetiously. None of them, this doesn't come out of one of their textbooks. They're not going to say this, but this is exactly what they believe. They just don't want to say it out loud. Now, design or accident. Consider these 5 areas of coincidence. We all know what a coincidence is, don't we? You ever had a coincidence in your life? Well, that's coincidental. Now, as Christians, what do we say? There's no coincidence. God knows you. Okay? He knows where you live. He knows your address. It ain't a coincidence. God's taking care of you. The Bible says the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. He knows what he's doing. Okay? Nothing in this world catches him by surprise. You understand that? Nothing catches him by surprise. He catches us by surprise, but not him. So, here's 5 things I just want you to reckon. First of all, protocosmology. They like to talk about the Big Bang and everything just, spread out and it slowly slowed down. Okay, where did the original singularity, which is what they call that original ball of mass that exploded, where did it come from? Where did it come from? Oh, we don't know. We don't know. We can't explain. Well, okay then, so you're taking it on faith. And they hate that word, by the way. They hate faith, okay? They can't explain it. So it's just a coincidence that this big ball of mass was there in the beginning that exploded, okay? And created the Big Bang. We'll talk more about the Bang in a minute. What about this one? Cellular genesis. Now this one, this is why you have books like by Dr. Michael Behe, who's a biochemist, and there's several others that are out there. There's a biochemist from Australia that says evolution is so stupid at the microbiological level that you wonder how anybody that has a brain cell can believe it. And these are the guys that work with microscopes, not telescopes, okay? Protocosmology. Now I'm going to walk up here. You see this little white membrane that's around all your cells? This white thing that's represented here? Okay. There are more than 600 different proteins in that membrane that surround every one of the cells in your body. Now, you ready for this? Proteins can only be manufactured in a closed environment. Only a cell manufacturing plant can make proteins on the inside. So how were proteins made in the first place to produce the shell so that proteins could be made on the inside? Do you understand how microbiology shows evolution is just stupid? There is no such thing as a simple cell. This protocosmology here, this cellular genesis, in other words, if there was no shell, oxygen kills amino acids, kills proteins, so there can be no proteins manufactured in open air to make the membrane to create a closed system so they can create proteins. And now I know this sounds complex, but really it's pretty simple. Okay? You can't have a manufacturing plant unless you have a plant. And there's no plant to manufacture anything. All right, what about this one? Biosymmetrics. Isn't it amazing that male and female evolved? Isn't it amazing we got 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 2 eyes? That's called biosymmetrics. There is complete balance in this world, such that you're going, that's a coincidence? It's a coincidence that the world has such perfect balance, that species have such perfect balance? Just a coincidence according to them. It's just amazing that Mother Nature did it that way. No, it's not. It's a design. It's designed that way. Because the fingerprints of the designer are on it. Okay, what about this one? Species symbiosis. There are tens of thousands of examples in this world of what's called species symbiotic relationships. I show a peony flower because a peony flower can't open. A peony flower can only open if the ants chew the wax off the bud. If the ants don't chew the wax off the top of the bud, the peony won't open. So which one evolved first, the peony or the ant? Because if without ants, there's no peonies. Without peonies, several ant species can't even survive. They need that wax to produce their young. That's called a symbiotic relationship, and there's tens of thousands of them in this planet, where one species depends upon the other to survive. Now, how did that evolve? Okay? And then there's conspicuous design. How many of you ever have seen the Mount Rushmore? Let me see your hands. Okay, all over the room. All right. Did you stand there and look at that thing and go, wow, would you look what wind and rain erosion did? Did anybody think that wind and rain erosion made that? No, because you're able to look at it, even if you don't know the names of those people, even if you don't know why those heads were carved, you are smart enough to stand there and say, somebody made that. That did not just happen. Somebody made it. That's conspicuous design. And can I tell you something? It's everywhere in this universe. That's why God says the invisible things of Him are clearly seen, and they are without excuse. They know. The stronger their telescopes get, the better their microscopes get, they know. And still they refuse. They absolutely refuse to admit somebody created the van. They won't believe it. They won't believe that there's... And then there's many others we could go into. Like, for instance, I had several pilots on my board when I was at Lana Kilo. Several of my board members were pilots. One was an F-15 pilot for the U.S. Navy, or for the Air Force rather, and another one was one of these big Coast Guard Hercules plane pilots, and so on. Do you know airplanes depend on systems? Your automobile depends on systems. There's the electrical system. There's the drivetrain system. You understand what I'm saying? And all these systems have to be present, or guess what? You don't have a working airplane. You don't have a working car. All the systems have to be there at the same time, or you have nothing. You've got a big paperweight. They know this. So all these systems in just the human body, the circulatory system, the skeletal system, the neural system, all these systems have to be there at the same time, or guess what you have? You have nothing. Nothing. And so we won't go into any others because it takes up time. Coincidences, like the 4 guys back in the old days, the guys didn't get to go in when Mom gave birth. They had to wait in the waiting room until the doctor came out and told them. So up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 4 guys were waiting. Their wives were in there to deliver their children. And so a doctor came out to Mr. Jones and said, "Is Mr. Jones here?" And said, "Yes, sir, over here." He said, the doctor says, "Amazing, your wife is fine, and she gave birth to twins." And he said, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. I work for the Minnesota Twins." He says, "That is absolutely amazing." And so in a couple minutes, another doctor came on and he said, "Is Mr. Johnson here?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm right over here. And Mr. Johnson, I'm proud to tell you your wife gave birth to triplets." And he said, "Wow, that's awesome. I work for the 3M Corporation." That is amazing. And then it wasn't long before another one came out and said, "Mr. Andrews, is Mr. Andrews here?" Mr. Andrews said, "Yes, I'm over here." And he said, "I have some great news to you. Your wife delivered quadruplets. 4 babies." He says, "Man, that's awesome. I work in the head office of the Four Seasons Hotels." That is amazing. Wasn't long, another doctor came out and said, "Mr. Smith here?" And they said, "No, Mr. Smith's not here." I said, "Where's Mr. Smith?" "Oh, he left." "Well, why did he leave?" He said, "Because he works for 7-Eleven. Coincidence, okay? How much weight should we put on coincidences, okay? And so why should so much trust and belief be placed in coincidences? Why should they be given such credibility and treated as if they're science when they're not? They're not science, okay? Now, let me talk about coded information. Coded information, all right? Everyone know what that is? Everybody knows what that is, right? You've seen these things before. They're CDs or DVDs or Blu-rays, whatever. They all kind of look like that when you flip them upside down, okay? And so, you know what's on those discs? Coded information. Now, let me ask you something. If I'm holding a disc, I was going to bring one. I was going to bring Mrs. Blankenship's disc. She's got a disc of favorite hymns that she produced when she was over at the missions office. Of all the people that worked at the missions office, she produced their favorite hymns and played them. Beautiful. Go see her. Tell her Brother Wygle advertised her CD. Okay? But here's this. Now, can I get the music on Mrs. Blankenship's CD off if I hold it up to my ear? How about if I touch my finger to it? Do I get any of the information on? What if I put my tongue on it? Can I get the information off? No. You see, without a reader, something that's capable of reading that coding, all I have is a frisbee. That's all it's good for is a frisbee. Now, you have to have a reader, okay? You have to be able to access the information that's on there. So you plug it in your car or at home or whatever. All right, now here's what you need to understand why I'm doing this. You see, the DNA molecule in your body, it carries one thing only, and that's information. It does nothing for you. All it has is information. If I was holding a strand of DNA, it's a balled up molecule. It's all gobbed up, okay? But if it stretched out, it would be 7 feet, approximately 7 feet long. In other words, I'd be holding it right here, and it would reach down to the floor. You wouldn't be able to see it, because it's about 5,000 times thinner than a human hair. Okay? But all it has on it from top to bottom is information. Okay? Then, so without something else, the DNA molecule is just what? It's a frisbee. That's all it is. And then there's this molecule called the RNA molecule. The RNA molecule is a braille reader. And it comes up and it tickles the DNA. I'm exaggerating here. And the DNA goes, like that. And the RNA molecule goes in. And then just like a braille reader, it goes right down the strand of DNA and takes information on how to create proteins. This is the formula for creating protein. The one that makes your hair. And then, after it's got what it needs, it unplugs, it pulls this little thumb drive out, and the DNA molecule closes back up, and the RNA molecule goes across the cell, plugs in to the other side of the molecule, and the RNA molecule downloads or uploads that information to the cell. Then the cell produces that protein, because the DNA told it how, and the RNA molecule is the one that transfers the information. Now, okay, you know where I'm going with this? Okay? Which one of those two molecules you think evolved first? They can't exist without each other. They have no purpose without each other. Again, at the microbiological level, this is why you have guys like Michael Bay saying people that believe in evolution are just stupid. Because it cannot happen at the microbiological level. Now, let's talk about the undiscussed evidence of the Big Bang. Everybody's heard about the Big Bang. In fact, I heard a Lutheran minister once lecturing as I drove through St. Louis, and he said, everybody's talking about a Big Bang. Big Bang, Big Bang. I said, okay, you want a Big Bang? I'll give you one. In the beginning, there was a Big Bang. And God created the heaven and the earth. Okay? And so, and I thought, he made me laugh. I thought, well, that's kind of funny. Now, could God have used a Big Bang? Sure he could. God can do anything he wants. He can start anywhere he wants. He can, if he didn't have to start at point A and go to Z, he can start at C or D or F or G if he wants. It's up to God. He's God. He don't owe us an answer for anything he does. But why not? I doubt that he used one. Here's some of the things they'll never tell you about a Big Bang, okay? Here's some Big Bang inconsistencies. So next time they throw this around like it's just, guaranteed, already proven that it took place, okay? Well, number one, there's no point of origin. They don't know where the point of origin is. They can't find it. They can't point to a spot. And you know why they can't point to a specific spot? Let me show you some of the reasons. First of all, they don't know where the Big Bang took place. Because, first of all, there's divergent speeds. If they say this is the point of explosion, how come the galaxies that are in closer to the point of explosion are moving faster than the ones that are out there? Shouldn't the ones out there be going faster than the ones that are inside? And why is there this divergence of speed everywhere in the universe? They can't find a consistency. You see in an explosion, okay, I worked with the EOD guys when I was in the Army. In an explosion, yeah, there's a consistency in every explosion. Every one. They are able to determine things very easily. Now, number two, anomalous trajectories. The galaxies, if you have an explosion, if I hold a hand grenade here, it explodes, do you know they're going to be able to find the exact point of the explosion? Because they're going to know everything goes away from that explosion. 360 degrees, everything's going to go away from that point of explosion. Well, if this was true, then shouldn't the galaxies all be moving away from one particular spot? Well, here's what they actually find. It is true that some of the galaxies are moving away from what they perceive as an explosion point. But guess what? They also have galaxies that are moving toward it. Now, how do you explain those? Not only that, they have galaxies that are moving obliquely. If the explosion point's over here, why is this galaxy moving this way? And then, the scariest ones of all is how come they find remote galaxies that are just going around in place? They're not moving anywhere. They're just sitting in one place going around. They're not moving at all. So this stuff they're not going to tell you, but they know it's true. They know it's true. Then there's the consistency of visible order. Seems like wherever they find galaxies, they're in the same consistency of order. They all look basically the same. Now, they like to photograph certain ones that they call proto-galaxies and tell you they're evolving into complex galaxies. No. What they find, they can go deep into the galaxy of the universe, and guess what? They find ones that are just as advanced and just as organized as the Milky Way. Just as advanced and just as complex as Andromeda. And they know it. Not only that, there's the incongruous galactic distribution. This is the distribution chart that's put out. A Russian scientist put this out. The United States agrees with them. This is the general distribution of galaxies throughout our galaxies. Where is the explosion point in this? And by the way, you are here. That's where you are. Okay, I looked this up. You are there. Take my word. Right there. So if you're hitchhiking through the galaxy, okay, right there. It's going to be hard to get an Uber, though. Okay, it's going to be hard to get an Uber. And when in the world has an explosion ever created order in the first place? I mean, whether you're talking about what took place in Oklahoma City, or what took place in Beirut, Lebanon, or what took place in an explosion in Africa, or when has an explosion ever created organization? All an explosion creates is chaos. That's all it ever creates. Now we come to the evolutionist touchiest subject, and that is time. The Achilles heel of evolutionists is the amount of time. Too much complexity, not enough time. The problem of complexity. Did you know that scientists have not always believed the Earth was 4.5? By the way, you want to know why they like to say 4.57? It's not that they have a formula that says 4.57, but it makes them sound smart. 4.5723. We got this figured out. Oh, give me a break, okay? No, here's actual history, okay? In 1750, they believed the Earth was 75,000 years old. It hit its first million in 1770, about the time of the American Revolution. 65 million years in 1833, and so on. Now look at the 2 and of the 3 and the 4. I was in school. Here, these two. I was in school. I can remember when they removed our science textbooks, okay, and replaced them the next year, they found 1 billion years in 1 year. Wow! Them guys are smart. They found 1 billion years in 1 year and replaced our textbooks. Can I tell you something? Now what they're doing, saying since about 1998 is around 5 billion. Around 5 billion. Why do they keep upping it? They keep upping it because of this. They find complexity, whether they're looking at a leaf or a human cell. They find so much complexity that they go to themselves, there is no way this could have evolved in 10 billion years. Couldn't happen. And the more complexity they find in things, the more time they need. And so how do they get the time? They just create it. Don't you remember the van? They could just back it off as far as they want. They never have to explain where the van came from. And they can add as many billions or billions of years as they want. Do you know just 120 years ago, I'm not kidding you, 120 years ago, medical science and scientists believed that the human cell was nothing but a ping pong ball with goo in it. That's what they believed. In fact, they called the stuff inside the cell phlogiston. And phlogiston is why things catch on fire. Because phlogiston, like gasoline, is flammable, and when a flame touches it, phlogiston explodes into flames, and that's why things burn. Because it has phlogiston. Wow, boy, is that science, okay? But you know, they actually find out as they're looking today, the better their telescopes get, the more they see, they find out just how complex a human cell is. No, never mind the membrane that's around it that protects it, okay, the manufacturing plant. Okay, but there's the Golgi apparatus, the ribosomes, the endoplasmic reticulum, the cytoplasm, the nucleus, the chromosomes, the lysosomes, the nucleosis, the mitochondrion, the cell membrane, and on and on and on. And by the way, that right there is just one of your skin cells. That's one of the simplest cells. Just think, there's also epithelial cells, muscle cells. The most complex of all the cells in your body is a nerve cell, the ones that are up in here. And then there's the connective tissue cell. These cells are super complex. Now, a German doctor, okay, his name was right there for you, Dr. Gerhard Michael. Dr. Gerhard Michael did a map. He did a schematic map of everything that happens in a human cell in 1 second. This is the map of everything that takes place in one human cell, a simple cell, in 1 minute's time. Well, let's blow up just a little piece of it, okay? We're going to blow up just that section right there, okay? That's what it looks like right there. Nobody ever refuted him, because they admit all this stuff happens in a human cell in less than a second, okay? Now, here's the facts. There are more functions, electrical impulses, and biochemical exchanges of data in one human cell in 1 second than the total number of phone calls, emails, and texts from New York City in a month. In 1 second. And you're going to tell me this simple cell evolved and had no designer. So the next time you hear someone refer to the evolution of the simple cell, remind them there is no such thing as a simple cell. And remember, we're just talking about a simple cell, a simple tissue cell. We're not even talking about a nerve cell. That's 100 times more complex than what you're looking at there. So evolution likes to make up their timeline. Here's their timeline. Here's the big moments in their timeline. First of all, 15 to 20 billion years ago was the Big Bang. That's 15 to 20 billion. And then 10 to 12 billion years ago, the galaxies congealed. The galaxies conformed, okay? Here's the next step on their timeline. 8 to 9 billion years ago, our solar system began to congeal and form the various planets, asteroids, and so on. The sun, the moon, all the way out to Pluto, and the dark planet. There's an exoplanet that's on the outside of Pluto, which they found now, and it's huge, and they don't know what to even call the thing, and they can't find it. It's dark, but anyway, that's another story. And that happened 8 to 9 billion years ago. And then 4.57 billion years ago, the Earth slow cooled, okay? And then 600 million years ago, the first amino acids were produced that formed to make protein chains, and these protein chains then formed, I guess, the membrane to make a cell so that the cell could make proteins. Okay, and so that happened in 600 million. And then 1 to 2 million years ago, the first upright human stood up. He's called Homo erectus or Homo habilis. They call him both names, okay? And so he stood up, and it's all a fairy tale. They just made it up. It's not real, it's a religion. It takes more faith to believe that baloney than it does to believe the Word of God. Now, evolutionists must have countless experiments and scientific data to prove the ages of time they claim to be true. Wrong, absolutely wrong. They do not have a single test that can give the dates they want. They make up these assumptions. Remember we talked about assumptions? That will give them the time that they want. Like the stalagmites and stalactites, they ignore the fact there was a great flood and it oozed into those caverns like toothpaste. Blop, plop, 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 plop. And then, once the layers above it that pressed down on it hardened, it began dripping in microns. And so they say, how many millions of years would it take to build up this stalactite because of the slow drip of what's in the water? No! It came into that cavern like paste during the time of the Great Flood. But again, another thing they hate to admit. They have none. They have no scientific test. They make assumptions based on need. The vast amount of times in order to all comprehend all the complexity in the world of evolve. And so here's I'm just showing you 69 tests. Here's 69 tests. The decay of Earth's magnetic field, we'll talk more about that next week. Influx of atmospheric radiocarbon, the influx of meteoroid space dust, the influx of juvenile ocean water, and so on. You can go on. Here's 69 of them. Heat efflux, cooling of the Earth, the influx of oceanic gold from the land. A lot of people know when our aircraft carriers are out there, they actually scoop up gold and silver. It's in the ocean water. And so when our aircraft carriers come in, there's usually FBI or police that go on board, and the United States Navy will take off several billion of gold that they've taken from the water they purified while they're out at sea. It's right in the water. And then about the influx of oceanic silver, all the way down to lunar orbital gravitational decay. Okay, there are 69 experiments. Here you go. Let me sum them up for you. The greatest amount of time in those experiments is 500 million years. Is 500 million years enough for evolution? Not even close. They need billions. Okay? All right, the smallest is 100 years. It says the Earth is 100 years old. Okay, all right. And the average, if we average all of these scientific tests, is 32 million years. Is that enough for evolution? No. Evolution cannot even cite one test that gives them the time that they need. So, here's how much they need for the Big Bang on. 15 to 20 billion years. They don't want to narrow it down any closer than that. Okay? And here's how much they can actually produce with scientific tests. Not even 2.5% of what they need. So guess what? If there's not enough time, guess what collapses? Their whole paradigm collapses. There is no evolution without time. They need time. That's why it's there killing you. They want you to believe that the universe is that age, when the truth is, the actual science says that the Earth, the universe, the solar system is all like this baby. It's all geologically young. Okay? Now consider this evidence. We're just about done. A couple slides to go. Know this. You need to understand this. As a creationist, I'm a creationist. I don't need to prove that the Earth is only 6,000 to 12,000 years old. I'll explain those dates later on. I don't have to prove that. All I have to be able to show is that the universe, the solar system, the moon, and the Earth cannot possibly be as old as they say it is. If I prove that scientifically, they're the ones that just had the rug pulled out from under them. Because without time, they got nothing. They have no evolution. And so, is there science out there that says the Earth is that young? Oh yeah. We're going to look at a whole bunch of it. And we're going to show you just how young this universe really is. Okay? The next week, we're going to deal with the scientific evidence that makes the concept of evolution not only bad science, but it reveals that it was constructed on a premise of godliness. So that finishes part one. Now let's go back to Nicodemus for a second. Being a leader could not save Nicodemus. He was a leader of Israel. Nor could the fact that he was an elderly person, nor that he was well educated, nor even the fact that he was complimentary toward Jesus. He said Jesus is a good guy. You're a prophet. You do miracles. Bragging on Jesus couldn't save him either. So not being a leader or elderly or well educated or complimentary, none of those things could save him. And so Jesus told him, you look right past his age, his education, his ministry position, and his personal fears, and pointed him straight to the direction that mattered. Except the man be born again, you will not see the kingdom of God. It's just that simple. There is a creator. He came to this earth. He died on the cross to save us. And if we don't accept him as our Savior, we are robbing his glory every time we say Mother Nature, every time we say evolution. We are stealing God's glory. Because he's the one that made this stuff, and we're giving the credit to someone else or something else. And so it is evil. Next week, we're going to look at these four, and we're going to find out they're just babies. They're just babies. They're not even close to being the age that they say. All right, let's be dismissed in the word of prayer.